what do you think are the most important issues facing the community coming up with the midterms?
Okay, thank you. President Harding, one of the things, as I said, I'm Berdetta Hodge, and I'm on the Tempe City Council. I've been on since July of 2022 this year, but also I've been on school board since 2016. When I was elected to school board, I was the first African American to be elected to the school board in Tempe, Arizona. But I was also that made me the first African American woman to be elected in Tempe, but also in Albuquerque and Chandler. So it was very much indeed a landmark when I got on the board. So and I also, my son and I we run Booker T. Washington Head Start. It was started by Calvin C. Good. Back in 57 years that Calvin C. Good started that Head Start, and he has passed on, and he's left the legacy to myself and my son to keep continuing on and running it, and we own that Head Start. So very much indeed important. Education is always a base in my life. To your question, I think we can go to the heart of it, and I think the biggest thing in the midterm is making sure we pull out the African American vote. A lot of the times, as we see, is if we don't like or we don't agree with 100% of what a candidate's saying or doing, we tend to say, well, we'll stay home and we won't vote for anyone, or we don't want to, we'll stay out of this election. We see that a lot. What's happening with the Hobbs candidacy for governor, is that people may not align with her. She done something that they don't like, but they also don't realize that we also have another candidate that's extremely worse. And you have to sit down and you have to start to think about, what is your biggest issue? What do you want out of this? Would you rather have a person you may not agree with maybe 10-15% of it, or a person that you may open that door to someone you don't agree with at all? And I think that's a big issue with the midterm elections, is that people, as we go into it, we don't feel that we 100% align with a lot of the candidates. So a lot of people are saying they'll just stay out of it. And that gives the door open to people who can do worse by our African American community. And that's one of the things we're facing in this election right now, is that I hear a lot of people are saying, I'm just not going to vote at all. But not voting at all is also almost giving a shout out to the person who you would not want there at the same time, because their constituents are not staying home. Their constituents are supporting them no matter what, behind the backing. And I see that as one of our biggest issues. Another issue is we don't get behind our Black candidates enough. I mean, we do have several Black candidates from every level up there. And as African Americans, I don't know if it's the fact that they just don't know they're out there or what's going on, but it's not a lot of African American support for African American candidates. And that's going to affect us in the midterm too, because we get people on school boards and city councils who are not in line with the values that we have in our community. And this is how we get the extremes on either side. It could be on both sides, but this is how you get the extremes to be in office, is because we don't go out and we don't research our candidates enough. And that's one of the concerns. And this is a major concern. It's education on the base, it's healthcare, it's a lot. It's the fact that we don't have our reproductive rights. All this is coming to play. And right now we have opened the door, and if we don't get the right people in, they're going to continue to walk through. What is next? What else can they take away from us? And we just got to make sure that as strong as I say, African American women change electors. So if we get out and vote as African American women, we have changed. Look what we did in Georgia. Look what we have done all over the country. So we just need to make sure that we are in line and pushing forward on that vote.
You may be aware of the structure of the NAACP, and we operate through committees, and we also know that all of our committees and all of our, issues are interconnected, right? We have a criminal justice committee, which is chaired by Princess Lucas Wilson, and she is our third vice president. We have an education committee, and that's chaired by Pamela Cowan, who is our first vice president. And then we have a political action committee that is chaired by Dr. Camilla Westenberg, and Dr. Camilla Westenberg will join us in the conversation as soon as Jevin is able to join us. But like I said, we invited him at noon, so we thought this was going to take a little bit longer. Okay, but we're glad you're here so that we can go ahead and engage in these discussions. Okay. So like I said, Dr. Westenberg will be joining our discussion shortly, and then we would like to open it up to anyone else on the call at the end to ask any questions they want. My question, another question as you were talking, I want to, it's two parts. Okay, number one, how did you get interested in public service, do you think, as well as, when you talked about the different school boards that you were on, what motivated you to get involved in public service, right? Because I not as high level, but when our children were in elementary and junior high school, I made it a point to carve out time in my agenda to be on they used to call it PTA back then, right?
They still do.
Parent Teacher Association or something. So that they had representation matters. We all know that. And as tired as we all are, representation matters. And that's my second part. We know that oftentimes the female vote and the Black vote matters. We can change the tide. But what about those single parents or not necessarily single parents, but what about the parents who have to work 2 or 3 jobs and don't have the time to volunteer? How do we put that in the
mix of everything?
Yeah.
Well, I would say one thing is, you asked me a question about how I got involved. I was a single mom. I was a single mom of 2 boys. I had 2 boys, and I realized that I needed to be their number one teacher. And because they weren't getting, when I in the school districts they weren't getting any Black representation. They had never had a Black teacher. They had nothing to look forward to. And I didn't want my sons to feel like only people they could look up to were not people of their color. So that's why I got more involved. I like you, I started with PTA boosters and then moved up into committees and just started working in the school district. And I had one person tell me one time, if you want to really be the change, you have to be the change that you're looking for. And that's how I ended up running for the school board in 2014. 2014 was a hard year. I lost by less than 1%. And people told me that I could never win an election in East Valley because it hadn't been done too many times with African-American women or men in the East Valley to win elections, especially in Albertuque. No one had ever, a Black person had never won Albertuque before. And it was a really hard, devastating loss until I went to my schools. I was a part of the Black Student Union. Black Student Union students came up to me one time and said, "Ms. Hodge, you're going to run again?" And at that point, I didn't know if I wanted to, because I had they killed me in media. They called me a welfare mom. They called me everything you could possibly believe. I didn't have any values because I was a single parent, and it was all over the paper. So I didn't think I can put my family through that again to try to run again. But the girl walked up to me and she said, "Ms. Hodge, if you don't run, it hurts because we don't have a Michelle Obama that we see. You are closest one to us. You show us that leadership can happen in the Black community." Mm-hmm. And that made me go back out in 2016 and run again for school board and win my seat. And that's how I became the first in that area. And I just realized with school board, there's so much more I could do. That's why in 2021, I took the bid to run for city council, because there's so much of a connection. We need voices and diversity on every level. And there was no one else in the city that was going to take that on, because it is hard to win in the East Valley if you're African American. So I took it on and I ran and won. And I'm overlap on city council and school board for 2.5 years. So that's the reason how I got involved, is because I realized there was no one else out there to represent me. Mm-hmm. When Floyd Galloway left, he was the only person that we knew in the East Valley that we could run to. And I met him in high school. So he's one of the people I'll give credit to that made me realize that we can make a difference and make a change. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up on that. And I understand when you have African Americans, you have lower income people, they have to work multiple jobs. They can't be involved in everything. They can't volunteer. They can't have the time. But that's why it's so important for them to vote the right people in, because they need the representation that's going to show, that's going to look out for their kids, that's going to look out for them on school boards and city councils and state representatives. So that's why it's so important. That's why what I say is to vote, is because, yes, everybody can't be myself or you, President, who go in and volunteer to the PTA, but it makes a difference in who we put on that PTA. Maybe you may not be able to go to the meetings, but you can always put representation on these places that will make that difference. And that's what we need to do. We need to build a bench. And that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to be, I may be the first, but I don't want to be the last. So my job is, while I'm here, is to make sure I have somebody who can replace me, that's going to have some of the same values that I have coming in, making sure that our minority community is represented, our African-American community kids, because it's a lot of representation out there, but sometimes our African-American kids do not get the same representation because we don't have the same elector. So to make sure that I bring another African-American in my place is what I'm going to be trying to do for the next couple of years. Since I am leaving school board, why not find another person that I can start grooming now to take my place? And that's one thing as we do need to start thinking about, is our next step. Instead of holding on to positions that we have to start grooming the next person to take our position. And I think that's what it would help out also, because yes, all of us, we can't all be there at the same time, but we need somebody to represent us. To be there, to be that voice when we can't. So, and someone we trust. And that's where I think that we can do. And I know the NAACP has been doing it for years, but that's where we can grow, is to grow our own candidates and placing people on boards and commissions, so we can have that voice throughout the state and throughout the country.
Okay. And you use the word grooming, and just as part of our conversation, you use the word grooming, and I think I practiced a concept called modeling. I think it's Albert Bandura, a psychologist, that talks about modeling. You know, how do we get our behaviors? And so I often took the children to meetings with me.
Yes.
So that they you know, by osmosis, I guess that's right. They
modeling. Yep.
So that's what, maybe that's a suggestion, or a one way that the community, we can move forward, is by getting the youth involved in what we're doing. Exactly. And another way that we're taking that action is that tomorrow we will be engaged in nonpartisan text messaging. Yeah. And we're appealing mainly to high school and young adults, and we're welcoming any age groups. We're making it intergenerational, but the method is that hopefully, if we start engaging high school students even in text messaging, or sending out information, nonpartisan information, to encourage people to go out and vote, well, they will get introduced to the process and maybe have an interest in civic engagement and civic action, you know. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to do that grooming and preparing folks, you know, to come behind us, you know, so.
I agree with you 100%. That's what I do. I spend a lot of time going to my schools. Means you would be surprised at the Black student unions, the young Dems, the young all. They're ready. They are interested.
Mhm.
They want to be involved.
Mhm.
You know, the problem is they want to sit at the table. Sometimes we always kind of tell them they're not ready, but why not bring them? Because the future that we're fighting for is their future.
Mhm.
And I think they should be a part of it. The decisions we make, the decisions I make sometimes on school board, city council, it's not going to affect me as much as it's going to affect the kids who are sitting in these classrooms right now. And bringing them involved and making them a part of it is a big push on what we can do for our next generation and make sure that we maintain that. And there's a lot of phenomenal kids out here ready to do whatever they can to make sure that their world is better than ours.
Mhm. Okay. There was a message that said, how can we get more of our youth involved in internships? Maybe they're talking about political internships. It just said internships.
We
Any thought
we
on
work
that?
quite a bit with that. You know, the best thing to do if you want, like Kiana Sears and myself, we do a lot with the young adults. So if you get with one of us or school board, because another role that I wear that no one knows is I'm the ASBA African American Black Caucus president for school boards. So I have a pulse check on all the Black school board members in the state. We have a meeting. And I can get the word out to every one of them and get our kids, our African American kids throughout our state, throughout our county, involved in it, because I have that list of who it comes in that's African American that's on a school board. And I can help with that. I also have the list of who's on the city council. I don't have the other ones, but I have city council and school board. So we can always get the word out with our students if you have any internships. It would be great. If you connect to me, and I can get the list out if there's someone in an area that you have that you want an internship for, that schools are, that you don't know anybody in those schools. I can help with that for you.
Mhm.
That's one thing I can do, being the Black Caucus chair.
Mhm. Okay, great. And I think maybe what we can do is, does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask Tempe Councilwoman Hodge at this time?
I have one, and hopefully y'all can hear me. Thank you for joining us, Councilwoman. I do have one question, especially when we start thinking from like political space in a nonpartisan sense. Is one thing that a lot of our candidates run into, the people who are entering into this space, is of course the fundraising side. So what resources can you recommend for people who are saying like they want to step up and they want to serve, but they also are not versed in, of course, the financial side of how to fund the campaign, understanding like things like the all the different rules and the options that are available?
That's a great question, because when I came in, I didn't have that behind me, and I've always ran in nonpartisan races. I ran 4 times, and all of them been nonpartisan. I would say that maybe I need to help work with you guys to get a committee together for mentorships, like people like myself and people like Kiana, and people who have ran for office. We have what you call donors list, and we have lists of people that we know who will donate to different causes or what candidates are looking for. And we have that information and resources. When people reach out to me, I always help with that. But I think it's something we can do to help out. If we had a form list, we can help. If you find somebody who wants to run for office and they need help trying to figure out how to kickstart their donor information, that's something maybe we could get a group of committee together and help out with that, because that is a big part of it, especially nonpartisan versus partisan, because the nonpartisan races, they're gonna after a while gear to you, because it's going to be a group that's going to come in your way that's going to be like, yeah, you're part of what we're looking for, so they'll come towards it. But the nonpartisan's a little bit harder. So if you want, maybe that could be something I can also help with, is like maybe get, I can even start with helping get lists of people that I know that donate mostly to nonpartisan races that are geared towards minorities, and get that together with you guys. And then we can always have a list of people who we've known who ran for office who can help out with that too. Because even though times have changed every year, the type of people who donates are always usually in the same bracket. So it's not hard to find them.
Okay.
So if you would like, that would be something I can help with too. I would love to help with that.
Great, thank you. Shifting back to the midterms, I've heard on different medias or things like that where people will say the number one issue, the critical issue is the economy, right? And people are going to maybe vote out current people in office right now because of the economy. If we hear that, or what is your suggestion of how do we, how do we get people to be a little deeper thinkers to understand that the economy didn't get bad overnight, so it's not going to change overnight either. And maybe, you know, I'm not an economist, right? We know that. We know that I'm like a counselor, teacher person, but
Yes.
my understanding is the economy, it's not going to change today or tomorrow.
No.
And the current administration didn't make this happen. Right?
No.
But what, like the infrastructure bills that were put in place, my understanding is eventually that's going to help the economy. So how do we get people to see long-term rather than short-term, and who do they think is going to put in policies and procedures that's going to make the economy work for them? That's what, that's a long kind of.
That's a loaded question, but I think I got
commentary.
the gist of it.
What's our response to those kind of people? How do we get them to see, how do we get them to see, you know, look beyond stop looking so surfacely and
dig into it
deeper maybe? Is that...
Yes, dive deeper into it. Ask them, we got to get into the nitty gritty of it. Yes, you want to.
Dr. Harden, if you don't mind, I'll jump in real quick.
Oh, okay.
I got to tell you,
how do can you upstage?
I know, just upstage me, just kind of cut it off completely. That's okay.
I'm gonna set the councilwoman up, because my claim to fame here is not that I'm the first, will be the first Black member of Congress from Arizona. My claim to fame is not that we're running in the closest seat in the country. My claim to fame is not that we're going to beat David Schweiker. My claim to fame is that I am Councilwoman Berdetta Hodge's son, and Councilwoman Berdetta Hodge raised my brother and me and taught us everything we needed to know to be successful. And so when you're talking about the economy, when you're talking about maximizing jobs and economic opportunity, what we need to do is we need to have leaders that are going to have multi-governmental partnerships that are going to maximize investments. And well, one of the things that is really important to me is how do we create an economic environment so that you can be born like me in my community, raised in that community, go to school in that community, work in that community, and retire in that community. And if you look at the CHIPS Act, the Bipartisan CHIPS Act, we now have the largest chip manufacturing facility that is coming to Arizona because of federal investment. But the only way that was possible is that you had to have the municipal leaders, the county leaders, the state leaders on board as well. And we have an opportunity here. We have Arizona State University, Grand Canyon University, and the Maricopa County Community Colleges is one of the best community college systems in the country. How do we make sure that we are maximizing economic productivity and inspiring high-wage jobs to create that ecosystem? And it's going to take all of us here on board. It starts by electing the right elected officials, and then folks that are willing to negotiate and bargain to get people to where we need to go. You know, one of the things I constantly think about is that Arizona has the opportunity to be the solar infrastructure capital of the world. Not the solar capital, because we can be there yesterday, but the solar infrastructure capital. And the only way that that's going to be possible is that we have to build a pipeline from when those children are born to when they're ready to enter the workforce. I see Dr. Laverne Tarkenton here. Dr. Laverne Tarkenton is the past president of the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center, longest running Head Start in the state of Arizona. Berdetta Hodge is the vice president. I happen to serve as the president. And we are working right now to make the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center the first STEM coding academy for preschool kids, right? How do we get 3 to 5-year-olds talking about STEM and STEAM, right? So that they are doing mathematics and science and learning how to garden and learning the art and creative thinking so that when they enter the K-12 system, they are prepared to succeed. And when we have a pipeline of talent that is coming out of our school systems that are ready to succeed, economic innovation, wealth creation will follow as a result.
Thank you, Jevin. I'm going to add my last piece that I was going to say is my part is we have to get people motivated in what they believe is important to them. When we talk about economics, we talk about you have to get to the root of what people are concerned about. If they're talking about, when they say economics, they're talking about, you know, well, we need to talk about the housing, how high it is expensive. Then that's when they need to realize that it has to come back down to the municipal part where the city is at when it comes down to how affordable housing is going to be implemented in the area. If they're talking about because the area, my property's value going down because of the education, you know, because of the neighborhood, then you got to think about what the school system looks like. So you really have to get to the root of what they're looking at and what is their concern to break it down to them. Because we're talking on, we got to bring it from that high 80,000 level all the way down to 80. We got to figure out what is the root problem, what is their biggest concern, because the word economics is such a broad statement, which my son has to be broad. I have to go down the pipeline to be narrow. I have to look at it from a level of eye level and say, what is it that your biggest concern is in the area? And most of the time, my son is, Jevin said it correctly, it starts on the local level and it pipes up to the larger level. So we have to start to educate people to start looking at exactly what is their concerns, what is it that you want out of this, out of an elected official, and maybe gear it to the right elected official. Because a lot of the times they want to charge the congressmen with things that city council members have or state legislators are doing, and they're not looking at it they're looking at it at a really big high umbrella look. And it could be more narrowed down. So like Jevin said it true, we have to all work together because it's a pipeline. And I believe that it flutes up. So it'll hit the level of to the Congress District 1 sooner or later, but it may have to come through a governing board and a city council and state representative before it gets there.
Okay, all right. And at this time, let me reintroduce our political action chair, Dr. Camilla Westenberg, and let her facilitate. And if you have questions, you know, put them in the chat and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible, because this is a conversation that we're having on how to help people take those their attitudes and turn them into actions. So Dr. Westenberg, do you want to ask a couple of questions at this time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harden. Councilwoman Hodge, thank you so very much for being here. I don't know that we've really met each other, but I have certainly met your son.
Yes,
planted a seed that has grown beautifully.
Yes, he is.
I'd like to go back to the notion of school boards. Because there has been a recent effort to really try to get individuals to participate on school boards. And your journey has been very interesting. I listened to what you said about a student coming to you and said, will you run again? Will you run again? What was it at the time that you first ran? What were the particulars as far as policies and legal ramifications that just precipitated you to say, I have to do this? And what is occurring today that may be distinctly different, or are things the same?
That's a great question. What made me specifically run is when you look and I hear the data on how our minority children, especially African Americans and Native Americans, were testing. The scores were low. I mean, they were low. And I think it has a lot to do with the tests they use. That's one of the things I'm still fighting for, is because we learned as an early age, the words that are implemented on these tests can gear the difference of how well these kids do. Like they were doing words like, I'll give an example. African-American kids at a young age don't know what a yacht is, but if they would have used just the word boat, it would have changed exactly, just as easy as just using the word boat versus yacht would have changed how that child would have perceived that answer. And I think that that's a lot of, we found out, and it's been a lot of testing in other states on how the tests are geared towards Caucasian and even Asian American students, but not anybody else. And that is one of the things that got me more motivated to realize that our kids are already coming in at a deficit. They're coming in at a loss because some of the vocabulary that they use at home are never, ever used in school. And that's not fair to our children when they walk in like that, that the words are geared towards one column of kids and not all columns of kids. And that's why we realized, even they found out that African Americans are more geared towards math and science. They're not English. English is not always their best subject. So how do we incorporate math and science into these tests that help our kids to give them a step up on there? There was just a lot of things. And those are just a few of the reasons why I decided. I was like, if we don't have anybody voicing these decisions, what will happen? It took me, I was in school and I didn't even know I was dyslexic until I was a sophomore in high school. You know, that could have helped me in all my tests that I was taking, that I was failing because I wasn't even understanding. And I just realized, I said, we don't have enough people to represent different communities of pockets of people. And that's the reason why I decided to run. And you asked me a question about what's going on right now. Well, some of the same situations are still happening to this day. We just had a statewide report card, they call it, results on what's happening. And right now in the state, Native Americans are still the lowest population of kids who are testing the lowest, and African Americans are second to that. So we realize now the cookie cutter education is happening, is not helping our children. And it's not just on, they tested on, not just on income areas like demographics, they went throughout and it's still the same. So that's telling us that something in that test, the tests we have, are not working with our children in the way that they think. And that's something I will keep going on and continue. We have to continue to fight. Another big thing is safety. There's a lot of problems within safety. A lot of initial people have their one way or the other about SROs, police, schools, whatever. But I'll just tell you this much. Our kids are dying, and we got to figure out a way to make sure we keep our kids safe. I mean, you don't believe, a lot of people don't see it because they don't have the same clicks I have, but I get, I have a app, and I get almost every school shooting that could have happened and do happen. And there are multiples every single day of someone who brought a gun to school, who didn't shoot or was going to shoot, and it was stopped. So this is a ongoing scenario, and it's only getting worse. And our kids are more affected by getting shot by it. And they're not the ones who's usually pulling the trigger, but they're the ones who end up dying. So what are we going to do to change that? Minority kids are more likely to get shot at a school by a Caucasian kid. So what are we doing to help with that? And those are just a few things that I can say. I can go on and on. We'd had a 2-day session on things that's going wrong in the schools, but those are just a few.
Another question that I have is, what are your thoughts about combating the notion of critical race theory as it is being inappropriately depicted? How do you think we can combat this phenomenon that's taking place?
Well, the problem is we have to be, as Black school board members and Black elected officials, and stand up and say, that's just the word I want to say is bull crap, because they are saying that they're using that to hide the fact of history. History is history. We cannot change what happened. It is a part of history. Slavery is a part of history. It happened. We have to go through it. We have to learn it. We can't pick and choose between what was history. It happened. Our kids need to learn about it, because the only way to make sure it doesn't happen is kids to understand it and learn from it. And the critical race theory is a master's degree class in college. What they are trying to use, they're hiding behind that to take out all of Black history in our courses, because they feel guilt, or they don't want their kids to know exactly what grandma was talking about when she had the black dolly in the back of her room. You know, it's almost like they're trying to hide what happened, and it can't be hidden. It's real. And our kids deserve to know what history they have, and not hide behind words like, oh my God, you're teaching our kids to hate with critical race theory, which is not true. We're just teaching history, that what happened, so kids can understand it. There is good and bad in our history, and we need to go through it. And I am not going to allow people to hide behind saying about critical race theory to change our history books and take out people like Martin Luther King and Edgar Meggers and all the people that we need to learn about, and Emmett Tills. Okay, that was one of a big issue they wanted us to hide in our books, not to talk about Emmett. No, it happened, and our kids need to learn from it. So I am a big pusher on that, and I'm not going to let people stand behind and talk about critical race theory is the reason why we shouldn't have in our schools. No, you're trying to take out history.
Let me jump in and ask candidate Jevin a question, please.
Yeah.
Congressional candidate Jevin, because our focus here is on that Gen Z, and how do we move them from attitudes to action? So this is kind of like a two-part question. Number one, how did you, we've been talking to your mom for a long time, so now we want to talk to you. What got you interested in serving? And then secondly, we're not trying to pick on that 18 to 35-year-old, right? But what can we do to maybe create an intergenerational synergy to get the younger folks out, to the ones who have already registered? How do we get them out to the polls for the midterms?
That is a great question. And Dr. Hardin, I really appreciate you asking.
There's two questions.
Yeah, well, those are great questions.
Thank you.
I mean, my first answer is very easy. I mean, you grow up with Berdetta Hodge as your mother. I think that, it pretty much is self-explanatory how I got involved. And for me, I mean, at my core, I love people. I love people. I love handshake, high fives, and hugs. I love trying new foods. I love learning stories. And the one thing that I learned very early on and had instilled in me is that you can move people, you can support people, and the power of the pen is very important. The power of the pen is very important. So I having the opportunity and the upbringing that I had, right? My mother raised my brother and I by herself, taught us everything we needed to know to be successful. That hard work, that perseverance, that grit, determination, how to get the job done. I was able to go off to one of the nation's top universities on a Pell Grant and a bunch of loans, right? And when you learn about, the power that government can have, and I learned from a very young age, the power that government can have, it always inspired me. I see myself as a ER doctor or a firefighter, right? We are putting out those fires so that everyone can live their life gracefully. An ER doctor on someone's worst day, their job is to make you feel better and get you to the next point. That's what your government officials are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be making sure that you can live your life happy, healthy, and safely. And that, that inspires me every single day to keep moving forward, keep striving. As we talk about young people, and this is a very interesting phenomenon that is not new, right? You go back to the 90s and it was these Gen Xers aren't getting involved, and the baby boomers got to save the day. You go back 10 years ago, my generation, the millennials, oh my gosh, now the largest voting bloc, they're not getting involved. And now we look at the Gen Zers. I can't believe that the silent generation is not involved, not engaged. Well, in actuality, they are. every social movement in this country has been balanced on the backs of young people. You look at you look at dismantling Jim Crow, you look at women's suffrage, you look at Vietnam protests, you look at March for Our Lives, you look at every social movement in this country, it is young people leading the way. And so the way that I see young leadership and the way that I see leadership and inspiring and recruiting young people to be involved is that we have to incorporate them in the process. My campaign, for example, my campaign is not a campaign. It's an incubator that is incubating talent, right? The oldest person on my campaign staff is 32 years old. And so we have folks that are 20, 21, 22 years old that we have trusted and are doing a better job than some people who've been in the field for 15 or 20 years. And that inspires people. The other thing is, and now I am slowly becoming the elder statesman in the room a lot of the time, right? Very, very slim, but I am subtly becoming the elder statesman. What we have to do as leaders that have been around for a little bit is that we have to be willing to have that peaceful transfer of intellect. We talk about the peaceful transfer of power all the time, right? And like, this may be our last free and fair election, but a part of the reason why we are even in this place in the first place is because folks have been intellectually hoarding, data, knowledge, and everything else, and not willing to pass the buck along to, allow the next generation to lead. And so, when they pass on or when they retire, and, whatever it may be, no matter what industry it is, business, education, politics, folks have to recreate the wheel. And every time, every generation, you saw it, the great generation didn't pass on information to the baby boomers. The baby boomers didn't pass on information to the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers didn't pass on information to the millennials. The millennials is failing to pass on information to the Gen Zers, and we keep having this circular conversation. And what we need to do, organizations like yours, the NAACP, political institutions, Council Member Hodge on the school board member Hodge, we need to be willing to serve as the collective tissue that unites people, brings people together so that they can have an opportunity at leadership. And the last thing I'll say about this is I ran an organization for 5 years called the Manifesto Project. The sole mission of the Manifesto Project was to get more people, young people in leadership. This came from a report that the Arizona We Want Institute, Laddie Coors and Civil Francis, determined in 2008 that young talent retention was one of the greatest issues impacting Arizonans. So we started this organization where we were allowing apprenticeships for young people, 18 to 25, 18 to 35, to serve on boards in positions of leadership to offer their talents so that they could start to have that peaceful transfer of intellect. But until that happens, you're going to see that recreation of the wheel. And the downside here is that we now live in a heavily advanced technological era. And so with that heavily advanced technological era, you just are not seeing, you're seeing more rapidly that recreation. And that is the reason why the Gen Zers and then the alphas and, so on and so forth, look as if they're so disenfranchised and disengaged, where the real reason is that we're just not working synergistically and we're not, having that ability to have those cross-generational collaborations and conversations.
Jevin, what you have just said has been said to me in many parking lots after meetings by young people.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Yep.
It is something that I have heard before, that the positions, the organizations are being hoarded by people and that young people have not had the opportunity to step in. I believe that there are young people who are interested. They're spitting it out there. They're saying it. They know it. And their way and method of demonstrating it may be slightly different too.
Exactly.
It's not going to be the same old as we know it. And it may need to be that it needs to be different, especially in this day and age, because we have a different political climate. But at any rate, I'm sounding off there.
No, you're exactly right. And then to that exact point, the one thing that I'll add to that is a big part of leadership is stepping aside. My mother raised my brother and I, and she did a doggone good job raising us, right? But the one thing that I can tell you that set me up for success and my brother up for success is that we had the ability to learn. And I say learn because we failed often, but my mother would always say fail forward. And so, as a leader, you want to get everything right because you figured out how to get it done. And sometimes that's just not the case. And you got to allow that space to cultivate talent. And cultivating talent means that you're not always going to get it right all the time, because you didn't always get it right all the time. And the next person is not going to get it right all the time. But it's really hard to let go of that. And I'm learning that myself.
Can I just add something what you just said about the difference of how the younger generation is handling things? I think history repeats itself, because if you look at what happened with King and you look at what happened when John Lewiston were there, they said the exact same words, how they were different or how they handled it. I think that each generation looks at what our success and our failures, and they kind of gear of what the fight's going to be like. And right now, I think we're back in that fight stage like we were in the early 50s and 60s, with the younger generation saying, we're tired of standing on the sidelines. We need to have empowerment. We need to fight now. And I think that's what history continues to repeat itself. And this is where we're at again right now, into the fight right now. We feel our kids, the younger generation is like, we can't stand around anymore. This is do or die. And I think that's the time has reinvented itself back to where it was in the 50s and 60s, how they felt the same way.
Okay. So Congressman candidate, Congressman.
Yeah, no,
Speaking into existence.
Congressman Hodge, and City Councilwoman Berdetta. So are you saying that am I to understand that younger generation is engaged? And
Yes.
what's your prediction of their turnout in the midterms? And maybe we have just missed it. Maybe we
honestly, I think
turnout
with Roe
what's the
versus
prediction?
Wade, Roe versus Wade has totally pissed off this generation. They realize they're going to have less rights than their grandmother, and they're mad. And I think this is going to have, if we can initiate to bring that anger out into action, this is our open window right here. Because if you talk to this generation, they're angry because they feel like they have regressed back in this generation, because they're the ones. It's not us who's the reproduction, because we're not having kids right now. We're not thinking about raising families or not raising families like they are. They feel that they have less rights, men and women. And this is the time, like you say, bring that action, that anger into action. And this is the time that we can enhance that. We can help guide them. As we was talking earlier about molding and grooming, this is the time that we can come in and say, this is what we can do, because they're angry. And
I just want to make sure that we're hearing this correct, that there are no, like, these destructive attitudes that we think they're out there, of those who are saying, oh, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not voting, or I'm turned off. That's erroneous, right? You think there are more
I believe it's more our generation of people saying
that's too lazy to go out and vote.
Go out there and do anything. It's the generation I think that's in our generation. We ain't got nothing. We're not gonna vote it. It ain't gonna make a difference. I don't like the candidates. But the younger generation is angry because they realize that this is my future you're talking about. This is my body that we're fighting over. This is going to be what's happening right now will happen to my kids, and they're seeing it happen. And sometimes no one, if they don't have the right people out there to help channel that energy, that anger, then it just boils up. And this is what you see. People are like, the young people are just protesting. The young people are because there's no guidance. It's us or them, and we need to all be together. We can be guiding them. That we need to have the fire and power that they have. We can use that for us, because some of us is becoming complacent. And if we had a little bit of their fire, if we used it together, we would be such a force to be reckoned with if we brought our forces together more, because a lot of us have become complacent.
I'm going to say, I really think that that's one of the focal points for the executive committee right now, that at the Maricopa County branch. I think we go out of our way to do that intergenerational modeling and exchange. And I think we definitely value their input. And then perhaps, you know, Dr. Westenberg, back to the political action chair, would you give them a little ideal of the of our circle to the cipher and the images that we're putting out to, you know, to really show that we are engaged, show that, I think by the project we're trying to do with the images, the circle to the cipher is showing them that we respect their opinions, and that I know, I think, you know, I speak for our executive committee, we want to do the intergenerational exchange, you know, so.
I think that young people are really articulating it. I unfortunately am not in Phoenix right now because of some family health related things and cannot be there. If I were there, I would be going to open mics. And
Yeah.
I would be talking, and there are young people out there who are doing poetry and they know the situation, they know it well, they know the politics, they're going to city council meetings, they're doing what they are supposed to do, they have radio stations, they are talking, they're out there on the airwaves. And I think what we need to do is just get those young people mobilized. My only concern is that I know that in Arizona, it's a battleground state. And let me go back to the Civic circle to the cipher. It's really based off of hip hop culture, which is my love, with the circle being in Africa, where you come in a circle together to work through things, and a cipher where you come together and you talk about what's happening in the hood, in a circle again, and it is intergenerational. And so it's a voice, it's a style that's completely different from the way that we are doing it. I think too often, like we're doing now, here talking, this isn't the way that we, and the platform that we're necessarily going to get some of the young people in to say, you need to go and vote. We need to get in another location and talk with them with maybe a little music, maybe with a DJ, maybe with, seriously, it's not going to be this type of forum. They're hyped. They are hyped and they are talking about it. I just think we need to act on it. And I agree. I'm going to be 75 coming up here. I can't hit the streets. I cannot hit the streets. But there are young people in this group who have hit the streets. They have been there at the Capitol. They have been there marching. So those are the ones that we need to get.
I completely agree with everything that has been said so far. And one of the things that I want to tack on to that is, Dr. Westenberg, you hit it perfectly, right? It is, we have to meet them where they are for authentic engagement. Yeah. And like Councilmember Hodge said, you know, it's not just the Gen Zers that feel disengaged, it's the millennials, Gen Xers, and everyone else as well that feel disengaged as well. And my challenge, and I've been saying this is not just me saying this to NAACP. When I was leading the Democratic Party, I said the same thing. And I actually put my efforts behind what I'm about to say next. We need to back our dollars up with engagement. Right. And so if we aren't investing in candidates that are going to, you know, resources just don't fall out of the sky. And so if we aren't investing in candidates so that they can do the work, or building infrastructure to do the work, you know, one of the things that when I was, and I'm going to parlay this to the NAACP, but when I was the leading the Democratic Party here in the state of Arizona, I set up an endowment so that we can hire a youth engagement director, a Native engagement director, a Black engagement director, and a Latino engagement director. Does that solve all of our problems? It actually doesn't, no, but it helps us take that step in the right direction. So if we want to get young people involved, looking at an organization like the NAACP that is meaningful, that has history, next cycle, right? Immediately after this cycle, or even now, if we have the resources, let's hire a young talent engagement director, right? And so this doesn't have to be significant, right? Few $1,000s a month goes a very long way to a college student that has a dream and a mission to make their name. And so when you look at meeting people where they are, right, like they could be creating TikToks, you know, going to these events, planning these events that Dr. Westenberg is talking about, so that we don't have to be the ones doing it, right? Like we're doing our part by funding the position, But we need in order, and I've learned this, right, as I'm now becoming more of a senior statesman in the room, right? Like, I'm not cool to an 18-year-old. I'm considered old, right? And so if we are going to, and that's been a big part of my campaign, right? It's been about how do I learn from the 18, 19, 20 somethings so that they can teach me, or they can do it themselves. Are they going to get it right every time? No, they're not. But if we're not trying, right? And then we have to fund it too. We can't just expect somebody to give their time. We have to fund it as well. So, one of the things to think about when you're looking at your budget priorities for next year is, how do we, have a stipend position, or how do we have a contract position, $3,000-$5,000 a month, where their job is to drive membership, right? Drive engagement, build out the social media channels, register voters, right? Host events so that we can get young people involved and engaged. And and again, back to that transfer of knowledge, that intellectual hoarding, by putting your dollars to the table, right? You are having that peaceful transfer of intellect, because now that young talent coordinator, right? Young engagement coordinator, youth recruitment chair that's getting that stipend or whatever, is going to have a seat at the leadership table. And what they're going to say to their friends is, well, you know what? I'm making $1 this month doing this work. And hey, you know what? You should come out too, because, there's an opportunity. I met this cool person that was good for my internship or my school classes. And then you have the conversation around voter engagement, participation, and then you bring them to these Zoom events. And the next time we do this, it's a party, right? A block party or a dinner or something along those lines.
Where is our party? Where is our congratulatory party? Oh, you can tell me offline.
You see what I'm saying? But
November 8th. Yeah.
That's right, November 8th. And so that's how we're going to have that peaceful transfer of intellect, right? Peaceful transfer of intellect, because we're bringing them into the fold. And now look, that young person may not be the young person that is the executive director or making all the decisions, but that young person that is the young talent coordinator that's getting that $1,000 stipend a month has the ear of the president and the executive director, and they know that their voice and their words are valued, because you're backing your support up with the financial commitment as well. And so, those are the type of things that we have to think through when we start looking at organizational change, talent cultivation, talent shift, right? Because it is really hard to just pass on the buck and say, here's your workload, right? We have to mentor them. And mentorship is a two-way street, right? It's not a one-way street. Mentorship is a two-way street. And so, bringing them involved and engaged is how we're going to end up moving the dial forward. And this is not going to happen tomorrow. The last thing I'll say, it's not going to happen tomorrow. This is going to have to be a conscious effort over time.
Great.
It's interesting, Jevin, because when you said it's a two-way street, it just occurred to me the other day that it's not just circle to the cipher, but it's also cipher to the circle. That concept just occurred to me the other day. So interesting.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The teacher is always a learner, and the learner is always a teacher.
There you go.
So we have 15 more minutes. We asked the councilwoman and the congressional candidate to give us 60 minutes of their time. Folks on the call, you are critical to what we're trying to do with the NAACP. Anyone please have a question that you'd like to pose to our guest? Anyone have a question they'd like to pose to our guest? Please raise your hand in case I don't see you. Oh, there he is. Okay. Dr. Tarkington. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I've been sitting here and just on pins because I know both of these individuals, and I'm so excited and proud of where they are today. And so I appreciate your efforts and willingness to get out there, to put yourselves out there, to do what you do. All of what you said is so very true. But what I want to add to this, Jevin gives his mother all this credit, and she did an excellent job. One thing she did teach him, and that is that it goes both ways. There is learning from the elders to occur, and so you listen as well as give. And so that, I think, is an important concept to try to get across when we are trying to pass on the torch, because for heaven's sake, Camilla talks about her age, I am well beyond that, and I am glad about that. I want to pass it on, but I want to make certain, I don't want to pass it on for individuals to fail in such a way that it causes them to leave, to become disenchanted with what's going on and just say, well, I give up. How do we help them to motivate them to action? That's one thing. And the other thing is that I talk on the phone to a lot of young people who tell me that they're not voting because they don't see the connection. And the one thing you brought up, I think today that we need to really stress, and that is on the local level where they know and can identify with some of these people rather than, yes, Jevin, at the congressional level, yes, but they see all those ads, they don't know those people, but they do see the other people at the board level, the city council, that's in my neighborhood, I can find them. So all of those things are important to get across to our young people. And it's probably more of a comment than a question, but I leave you with congratulations and thank you. And I am supporting you, Jevin, for sure.
Well, Dr. Tarkington, can I say one thing? I'm very lucky to have one of my mentors on the phone with me because you've been a mentor to me throughout my life. And I love you. And you made a pioneer to make me realize that strong Black women can do what they want to. And I'm just happy to call you my mentor and a second mom and my friend. So thank you so much for that. I love you always. You're right. I think the situation is we have to understand, we have to give them resilience. And that's one thing I think we've lost a lot of is resilience. Yes, you're not going to win every fight. So you fight the battles and you win the war. And that's one thing we have to understand. Yeah, this midterm election, we may not come out on top, but this is not the reason for you not to stop fighting. This is a battle. The war will continue. And I think that's the message that we have to make sure we give, because we're losing that. We don't even give that message in schools as much as we used to. That, yeah, there's going to be days that you're going to lose more than you win, but you don't never stop continuing to fight, because every fight, you win or lose, contributes to the war that we're fighting every day. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's a message we have to give out there too, that there's going to be days. Yes, there's going to be days. We may lose everything statewide. We might just pick up Jevin, but that's not a loss. You see, I put that in there. That's not a loss. It's a battle. We lost the battle. We can win the war because we got to start fighting for the next time. We got to make sure, okay, they have 4 years. Well, let's start fighting for the next 4 years, because they don't realize that it takes steps. It takes years to build this bench. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's what I think resilience come in. And that's one thing as us, as learners, can teach, because I think our generations I'm a Gen Xer, and the Gen Xers on up, we've learned resilience in a different way than everyone else. And I think that's one of the things that we can teach is resilience, that it's not going to happen overnight.
That's incredibly valuable thoughts. And I couldn't agree wholeheartedly. I do want to take a point of personal privilege to acknowledge on my Zoom screen, I have Dr. Laverne Tarkington to my right and Berdetta Hodge to my left, which reminds me of the early days of the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center board meetings, where I had Vice President Laverne Tarkington putting up her foot up my butt to the right, and Secretary Berdetta Hodge putting her foot up my butt to the left. It's always been, when you talk about, like my mother said, someone who has been a pioneer and has paved the way, the first Black superintendent of a major school district here in the state, Dr. Tarkington, right? And someone who has been on the front lines, right? And I think that, back to that mentorship piece of it, right? And then I'll talk about resilience after that, but back to that mentorship piece, I look at on this call right here, you got Dr. Laverne Tarkington, Dr. Karen Hardin, Dr. Camilla Westenberg, right? You got Dr. Ben Taylor, right? Even though he's a Juris Doctorate, right? He's still a doctor, right? You got Dr. Judy Green here, right? The amount of intellectual capital that is here, just on this call alone, that can be transferred to that next generation is immeasurable, right? And I'm not accusing you of anything, just so you know. I'm not saying you're not doing the work, but what I am saying is that we have everything within our community that we need. We don't need nobody else. We got everything we need. And so, we have to be creative of reminding generations about, the future generations about the importance of learning, right? And learning is not just in the classroom, but learning is, sitting in those boardrooms, right? It is making sure you're reading the paper and learning about, current events, and the history and legacy of organizations like the NAACP. You look at a young Black child that is in their classrooms, they wouldn't be able to be in those classrooms in the community college or university if it wasn't for the NAACP and the legacy of the NAACP. And so it's us reminding that, but the resilience piece is so spot on. You have a generation of kids, starting with me, a generation of kids that had something as simple as the restart button on their video games, right? When Ben Taylor was playing Atari, he didn't have a restart button. And so you think about what that means, right? They have the ability to reset so easily. They have the ability to communicate so easily. Let me just break this down for you. One of the things, I'm a theorist, and a political scientist in my other right too. And I'm a communications specialist in my day job. And one phenomenon that no one is talking about right now, for the first time ever in human history, we have 5 generations in the workforce, 5 generations voting, 5 generations that are communicating vastly different. We still have the great generation that is voting and working and doing everything. And they would listen to communications on the radio and in long form, right? And thoughts were broken down and things were very different. Then you have the baby boomers that would write a 3-page letter to their best friend as their pen pal. Then you got the Gen Xers that would take that same 3-hour communication that became a 3-page letter that is now a 3-paragraph email that is more instantaneous, but still some critical thinking. Now that same 3-hour communication, which became a 3-page letter, which became a 3-paragraph email, with my generation is a 3-line text message, communicating the exact same thought. And with the young Gen Zers, the ones that we're trying to recruit, right? You are communicating the same 3-hour radio communication that became a 3-page letter, that became a 3-paragraph email, that became a 3-line text message, is now being communicated in 3 emojis. And so wait a second here. You have vastly different communication styles. You have vastly different ways of interpreting information. You have instantaneous communication. I mean, you look at all of us, not just future generations or the youngest generations, but all of us, in a way, have limited our capacity to do critical thinking and thought processing because things are instantaneous now. We're being inundated with information. So we have to take a step back sometimes. And in folks like the ones on this call who have the ability to communicate to the masses, we have to rethink everything that we have learned about communication, about how you were taught communicating as a child, how you were taught communicating in schools or when you first got into the workforce. And we have to be resilient and readapt that to communicating to modern times, because we can't expect to do things the way it was when when I was growing up, we still had payphones and beepers, right? I couldn't imagine being a second grader with a cell phone. That would have never happened in my generation. And now you got kids that are 5 years old walking around with a phone better than mine. Right. And so, or 2 years old, right? That are, I got kids, I see babies that are work an iPad better. I mean, I'm a geriatric millennial, but I see babies that are working an iPad better than I can work it. So wait a second here. We as leaders need to become the students again and rethink how we communicate, rethink how we position a message, rethink, right, how we're going to be able to recruit and engage. And we have to be resilient, right? And, it's just like going to the gym, right? When you first start working out, you're sore, you're hurting, you go walk around the park, your hips hurt, your back hurt, your booty hurt, right? And that's what's happening right now. Our brains hurt. Our brains hurt because we have to learn something new every year. My mom taught me TikTok, right? Like my mom taught me TikTok. And so it's like, wait a second here. Now, when I get on TikTok, I'm communicating with people. People are excited, right? But it's something new, right? That I had to teach myself so that I can communicate to a broader mass of people. And so, as we think about that resilience, one of the things I hope that you take away from this today is how do we become resilient? You look at, I'm just picking on Ben Taylor because I see his pretty picture right here. You have someone who is a Juris Doctorate, who is a lawyer, right? Being a lawyer now, right? You got 18-year-olds that get in a car accident and they go download an app and they're texting on the app to whoever their lawyer is. That would have never happened before. So how do we communicate the importance of these professions? How do we communicate the importance of this engagement, right? In a way that meets them where they are so that they feel valued and they feel appreciated.
Okay.
Valued and appreciated. That's what we're all seeking here.
Okay.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes, yes. Good afternoon. This has been a great discussion. And just as you were talking, Jevin, I, in efforts to communicate with young people, those of us who teach, we're constantly adapting, we're constantly working to find a way to reach young people. And so one of the gaps that's a real gap is getting that reciprocal communication back. I know in my classrooms, you try different things. You'll ask a question. My generation, if you ask who needs more help, you'd see hands. This generation, you see stares. And so you have to change, how you address them. So do you have any suggestions on how to get reciprocal communication? How you get the feedback back after you've tried all these other things? You tried, emojis, and you've you've done all those things.
There is a days-old, tried and true method that has never failed me. And it is the constant effort of reward, right? And whatever you're rewarding, it's the same thing, right? You be bad, you get a spanking on the booty, right? But you be good, you get to eat some more dessert, right? It's the basic psychology here, and we have to meet them where they are, right? And so, whatever level you're teaching, right? Let's say you're teaching community college, for example, right? And I don't know which level you're teaching, but if you're teaching community college and you reward folks with, a point or two for engagement, I bet you go see engagement go up, because whoever got that C on that test want to get it to a B- immediately. And we have to be willing to be flexible, because that's not how we were taught as what we should be doing, right? If you're teaching elementary school, right? Well, you know what? I'm gonna bring some candy for you. You teach in middle school, we go in class 3 minutes early and you can check your social media. Whatever it may be, right? But when we can reward students, and this is something I learned from Dr. Tarkenton, right? Dr. Tarkenton, when I was a good boy, she didn't put her foot up my butt. And so, it was a reward. And so how do we do that? Right. And how do we, it's being creative, it's being innovative, and it's willing to blur those lines of what we have learned before previously. But when you're thinking about students, the one thing that I have always seen, and I spend some time in the classroom, and I do a lot with students now, but how can we go back to that basic need of value, right? Because that is a part of our core makeup, right? We as humans, we thrive when we feel valued. We thrive when we feel appreciated. We thrive when we feel rewarded. And something as basic as, a half a point for every time that you speak in class, or a quarter of a point, and you could max out at 5 points, whatever it is for a week. I don't know. But something as every time you speak in class, you get a half a point, right? I can promise you, that kid that got that 75 on that test is trying to get it to that B- is like, Ms. Wilson, every chance that they get. And we have to be willing, and back to what Councilwoman said, and I love that because I'm gonna be using this for the rest of the day now, but we have to be resilient with, unlearning the things of the past, and we have a willingness to relearn what may need to work right now in this point in time in history.
Yeah, I think the bottom line in terms of what you're saying is just persistence, because, I think most of us do all those things, everything that you just said, and those are great suggestions. And some of the courses I teach now, the framework is positive psychology. So we teach resilience, we teach fixed mindset, we teach growth mindset. Ms. Cowan also teaches those courses.
Carol DeWick's Mindset is one of the first books that I read when I got into leadership and changed my complete understanding of how to understand people. So I
Yeah. So we're teaching that now. So, colleges, universities have, moved toward that, and Ms. Cowan teaches the same courses. So anyway, thank you.
I love you all dearly, but I have a very rigorous schedule, as you saw when I was getting on this call. So I'm going to leave you in very good hands here. And the last thing that I'm going to say, I'm going to leave you in very good hands here with the councilwoman. And she raised my brother and me. And so I can tell y'all she's going to raise y'all just fine. Is this I'm going to leave you with a quote from my second favorite president of all time. My favorite president of all time is President Barack Obama. Hands down, you can't debate me on it. It's not going to happen. But my second favorite president is President Jeb Bartlett of West Wing. And on season 4 in West Wing, there was an episode where President Bartlett was at Kent State University. And at Kent State University, there was a bombing at Kent State University. And he talks about the American heroes. And he gives a story about, how the swimmers got out and ran into the fire. And the one thing I want to leave you all with is that you are American heroes and you're running into the fire. And he said in closing, and it's something that has stuck with me, and my mother and I, West Wing is very near and dear to us. It is our therapy. It is a family activity in our household to watch West Wing. And he said this in closing. He said that every time that you think that you have measured your capacity to meet a challenge, you will look up and you will be reminded that the capacity may well be limitless. And so right now we feel deflated, we feel defeated, we feel beat up, but just remember that our capacity as people is limitless. So just thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for being American heroes. I am the proud son of Berdetta Hodge, and I happen to may be a future congressman of Arizona. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Great. Thank you. All right. So, and thank you everybody for being on the call, right? And your presence made this possible. I mean, so I really sincerely thank everyone who's on the call, because we said it was going to be a conversation, and I hope everybody on the call had some takeaways. Okay. And like I said, I sincerely appreciate you following along this journey with us. We're all in it together. City Councilman Berdetta, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And I would like to conclude with, and anybody you're willing to adopt this saying if you want to, it's like, I was asked last weekend or so, what's my call to action? Can I give a call to action? And my call to action is say it forward. Okay. Say it forward. 5 by 5 by 5 by 5. Talk to 5 friends or relatives. Ask them to talk to 5 friends or relatives and have it to keep going. Okay. Ask them, do they have a plan to vote, and help them understand the importance of them exercising their very much. Dr. Westenberg, do you have any closing remarks?
I do not. I would just like to thank everyone for being here also. And we certainly have a journey to travel, and we're going to get there. And it is my sincerest hope that Arizona comes out. I can't say which color, but Arizona comes out
On the right side of history.
on the right side.
History. Okay, good. All right. Everybody have a great Saturday afternoon. And
Thank you.
this is power, as they say.
Thank
This is
you.
power.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you so
Good
much.
afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.